what I'm hoping that you guys can take away from this is three things. First, that operations is continuing to absorb fundamentally different technologies at a rate faster than ever before. So if you feel like, wow, it really does feel like this year we're doing something, we're really being stretched, let's say into containers, something that we never did before, the expectation that, of course you can do it. You're not crazy, that's true. The other thing is that we are detecting through a survey that we do every year that there seems to be a little bit more of a disconnect this year between CIO expectations and what we're actually doing, the things that are actually important to us that we need to deliver. And then the last thing, of course, is that we might just be a little more adaptable as IT than really anyone gives us credit for. I mean, certainly we all know that we can pretty much handle anything, but sometimes executive leadership sort of forgets that. So we'll just kind of a run book for this talk. I'm going to talk about the survey just a little bit, and then talk about the danger of being disconnected with leadership. But then I want to turn this into a pop quiz in 3 different areas and validate whether or not the survey results that we're looking at are true or not, because I figure you at Cisco Live represent the best of advanced monitoring admins, so you can help me correlate whether this data is correct. So yes, there will be show of hands, but we're what, an hour and a half into a happy hour at this point, so hopefully everybody's really excited and your hands will come up and help. So those areas are going to be, how much time are we spending doing deep device monitoring, how much of it is really about just managing overall capacity, and then how much of it is, are we spending time trying to do mapping or understand context before we can even do troubleshooting. All right, so just sort of survey results, and if you want to check this out, it's ittrends.solarwinds.com. We've asked thousands of people, and this is not so much pundits, this is actually practitioners and leadership who are working in IT. So this is not sponsored by an analyst firm or maybe tied to a particular vendor. The idea is, from an agnostic standpoint, what's actually going on in IT. And you can probably recognize a lot of the trends that we've seen in our industry, right? So back in 2014, we started hearing about digital transformation, right? So that got us realizing that there were a bunch of new skills that we needed, and we couldn't even hire them. We had to actually get involved in education. How many of you were involved with Cisco DevNet? Actually using Cisco DevNet? It's great, right? The idea, the presentation before about being an admin in a programmer's world, that's really important. By 2015, it turned into, okay, hey, great IT, you got this under control. Let me see how fast you can transform. By 2016, we started seeing, oh, we're just going to do a little bit of cloud. And by last year, I think a lot of us are spending a lot of time actually trying to untangle hybrid IT and sort of unintended complexities of adopting other technologies. So what popped out this year that's kind of interesting is there's a lot about artificial intelligence and machine learning and containers, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in a second. But it indicates that there may be a little bit more disconnect this year between the CIO's office and us in operations. So we're going to test that theory. And I could give you all the data from the survey at once, but you're not a machine, so this won't make any sense. But the idea is, when we asked what's most important, the technologies that that IT is dealing with right now, containers, cloud and hybrid IT, IoT, SDX, automation, big data, AI, machine learning, blockchain, robotics, and some other things. And so you can pretty quickly see that many of these things are not like the other, right? The majority of these things sound kind of cool and kind of hypey. So how do you untangle that for leadership? So one of the ways that I started thinking about this was, if you want to just come up with a basic measurement of usefulness, how hard is it relative to the benefit, right? So if you ask people, well, what's the challenge that's represented by a technology and how much efficiency do you get in IT? Well, really quickly, big data, AI, machine learning, blockchain, and to some extent, software-defined infrastructure, they seem pretty hard relative to the benefit that they're actually going to provide. So what do we do in operations? We don't do those things, because if they're not a benefit and they're going to dig into our time, we're simply not going to do that. And there's another reason for that, is that over the 5 years of this survey, this is one piece of data that hasn't changed, is that we remain, as a group, more reactionary than actually proactive. It's 75% or higher are spending more than half of their time reacting to problems instead of being able to be proactive to transform their environments, improve performance, and really focus on application delivery. And I say that because we're going to get into a couple of questions here. So one of them is, it appears that there is less of a us versus them, that operations and IT and admin are really all one and the same. And we're really talking about technology professionals that are now navigating a broad set of technologies, but from different perspectives. And so the way that we identify what we really do is not so much what we say on survey, but the way that we use our tools. And I'm going to give you an example here in a second and get your feedback on whether you're using tools in this way or not. But that's what tells the story, not what you say in a survey or sales data or anything else. So I'm going to show you 3 different examples. 1, deep analysis, and we'll talk about how much time do you spend doing deep analysis. 2, how much time are you spending taking care of scalability issues in and of themselves? And then the last one is how much time do you spend just trying to get enough context to figure out how to troubleshoot? And yes, this is interactive, and so I will be asking for show of hands. So let's start with this first one. All right, how much of our time are we spending doing deep dive analysis and looking for root cause? Because theoretically, all of the new tools that they're giving us make this go away. I'm assuming most of you have APC UPSs? No? APC? Okay. So this is about to be turned into a show of things that you might not know are a part of SolarWinds NPM. So for example, did you know that you can do your APC monitoring built in with the last release from 2 weeks ago? Just do the upgrade and you'll be able to see all your battery information and time remaining and the other data that's coming out of UPSs. Here's another one. Once upon a time, you could manage all of your call data from your call manager information. Well, how many of you are now managing SIP trunks? That the traffic is beginning to be more and more about managing SIP, and not only that, it's like, is that trunk up if it's not taking any calls? Do you need to have an alert to say that the trunk's gone down? It's kind of like having on an ASA a VPN collapse without getting alert unless you're sending synthetic traffic over it. That is also now built in. So again, we're supposed to be working on machine learning, but don't we spend most of our time still fiddling with details like SIP trunk monitoring, right? Another one, DNS, if I'm dealing with IPAM, let's say I finally moved away from spreadsheets. We've all moved away from spreadsheets, right? Okay, but let's say we haven't, but now we've got Route 53 that's a part of our DNS delivery system, and now we're responsible for monitoring whether that's working or not, or being able to troubleshoot that as a part of an application delivery issue. That was also added with the last release. So again, is that artificial intelligence? No, that's spending time working on details. The other one, I did make the joke about spreadsheets, but self-service. You're the person who still has to do IP addresses when you're on vacation. No, that ought to be self-service. That ought to be in the form of a wizard. You basically, like here, this one, create a new IP for a Jenkins container, specify the subnet that ought to come out, give it a name, and click reserve, and then you don't have to do that. Somebody else does that for them.
Does it tie into Blue Cat or anything?
Yeah, so the question was, does it tie into Blue Cat? Not yet, but definitely come by the booth. We'd like to talk to you about Blue Cat. Okay, so then Nexus. I'm assuming most of you are using Nexus, right? Nexus monitoring, detailed, you kind of care about that. So are you spending most of your time working on robotics, or are you spending most of your time trying to identify virtual device contacts that are a part of that Nexus switch? Are you spending most of your time actually dealing with interface lists that may be 2,000 virtual interfaces? You're not going to do that with a regular interface detail. Can you actually do that and search those out? Do you spend most of your time with Nexus, for example, trying to figure out what the config snippet is for a particular interface or virtual port? Or do you go look at the whole config and try to figure that out? Do you spend a lot of time messing with your VPC list, trying to identify VPCs that are broken, where maybe you've got an issue where one of the bonded pairs isn't actually configured correctly, or there are interface issues where you're going to need to look at the config, and you're going to spend a lot of time logging into 2 different servers and actually trying to pull out the config snippets, as opposed to, wouldn't it be nice to be able to do both of the Nexus switches side by side and compare the configuration snippets that are connected only with that VPC? So again, we're going to be, what was the other one that was up on there? Well, not so much robotics. Oh, IoT. Are you spending most of your time doing IoT, or are we still spending most of our time messing with details of our on-prem or delivery networks? And then the last one is, configs and ACLs. The great thing about Nexus is, hey, we're going to move all of our ACLs out near the port where it belongs, except now I got to log in and get all of those individually. Being able to look at the ACLs for each one of those ports and being able to identify where you have overlapping rules, for example, or be able to do config change and diff against previous versions to figure out why those rules are affecting that VPC or that port in the same way. So here's the question from these details, right? The theory was that by simplifying and concentrating services, things were going to get easier. Is that true? Do you find instead that by having more powerful and smaller network devices, you're actually spending more time down in the details for troubleshooting and configuration? More time, less time, same time. More time, about the same, less. Okay, so you're spending more time doing deep monitoring. That does not sound like the three technologies that we saw pop up on the survey. So that suggests to me that leadership really got in there. The other one is scale, and I just wanted to mention this as a reason for you guys to upgrade if you haven't already. For a long time, for the primary polar, you could support 100,000 elements per primary polar and 25 remote polars. Now, as of the next release, that supports 400,000 elements per primary polar and 100 agents. So it doesn't seem all that exciting because scalability improvements are not all that sexy. There's really nothing to see. So I kind of figured I'd do it this way, which is if you figured that every person in a town represented a monitorable entity, everyone in San Mateo could be monitored before 2018.2 and 25 remote data centers. And now you can actually support everyone from San Mateo, Green Bay, Wisconsin, Boulder, and Burbank, and 100 remote data centers. So why would you increase capacity that much? So that's really the next question, which is, are you spending a lot of time now just trying to figure out how large the network actually is, right? That when that you're worried about whether your tools scale, whether let's say new network segments are being added, or in the case of cloud where, it's just cloud. Well, actually we're in 2 availability zones in 2 regions. Each one of those is in its own VPC, so I've effectively added 5 networks. Where am I putting polars? Where am I putting scale out agents? So is just managing the overall scale of monitoring becoming a problem? And you're spending more time on that than actually being strategic. More time on dealing with scale than being strategic? Yeah, and it ends up being reactionary because it's not something that you typically plan for, it's something that follows on later. All right, so my last question, and then of course, I'm gonna send you home with a little bit of homework, just a teeny bit of homework, is that we're spending more time now trying to understand context, because as we overload devices, as we make them more capable, as the networks continue to become more complex, just being able to create diagrams that we can follow for troubleshooting is beginning to take a lot of time. So, if you, in the past, how many of us have spent a little bit of time doing Visio? Yeah, it's fun, isn't it? It's so great, and it's always up to date. No, it's terrible. All right, so this is a diagram. This again comes from the network monitoring engine, which was part of the last release. So the question was always, how can it be easier to build network models? And the answer is, we should probably be able to do that automatically. So here I've got 4 network devices. And I can see how they're physically connected. And down the right-hand side there, I can see basically everything that we know, all the context that we have on this 4506. I can see that it's got IPSLA operations. If I scrolled through that, I would get to the all the port connections that it has, so that I could see for each interface what it was connected to for its next hop. And the red up there is because I've got a lot of packet loss between those 2 connections, and it's telling me that it's actually happening from here. It's getting lost inbound. That is what we found, is that it's definitely helpful for physical topology and the services that are offered on those devices, but it's even more important when you get to virtual relationships. So here we've got 2 exchange servers. This is East and West. They're both running in hypervisors in VMware, so there's no way to easily connect them up. And I've got some latency between different elements of those 2 exchange servers, probably around synchronization. But because we have context of how they're connected over there on the right-hand side, you can see that there's actually connection data for that packet loss. And because we know how they're mapped and we can see the traffic, that actually lets us do application-defined mapping, and we can see all the services between those 2 nodes We can see the ports that they're connected on. We can see the effect of what would be raising an alert, and then also map it back to the executable that's actually supporting that application, because chances are it's not the network, it's never the network, it's always the application, and somebody's going to need to go figure that out, and that's probably going to be virtualization resource constraints or storage or something else. Makes it easier to hand that off. And of course, for those of you who are not using that rolled up into your no details views, you should totally do that. You can pop it in just like any other resource, so that you can see it right off the bat for traffic that's coming into that device. So let's. You're all using NetPath, I assume? Yeah? No? Oh, NetPath is the coolest thing ever. If we have more time, we'd talk about it. The mapping engine that it's based on, for those of you who are using NetPath, you can always tell when something is being pretty widely read, because we'll go and build a free tool version of it. So if you have not played with next generation traceroute, you should. It's basically traceroute, but it uses the same synthetic application traffic technology that NetPath is made out of, and it's TCP, not UDP based, so it actually works across firewalls and out on the internet. So definitely go play with that. So back to my last question here, which is, do you feel that complexity, or at least trying to define context, something we would have built in Visio before, is becoming not necessarily technically impossible, but you just don't have time to do it anymore? Do you find that you do like top level design diagrams, and then what you used to do, which was I'll go build my application map? No. Executives really like maps, don't they? Yeah, it's really handy. Okay, so that's it for my questions. There's a couple of more. Items there that came out of that survey, but the main thing is that if we want to actually close this off and try to figure out what we need to be focused on, and what makes me think that the survey actually shows something great, is, again, this is what overall was reported as important this year. But if we take out the ones that only appeared this year for the first time, and that would be all of the green ones, and automation, big data were there before, but they grew a lot, and then index that with the difference between what people say is important and what they say will transform the business, we can isolate the ones that our leadership is sort of interested in, but actual admins aren't necessarily. Because admins, we all say it's important, and it really is important. So big data, AI, machine learning, blockchain, those all kind of go away, and we look at this list, and what actually matters is we as IT are taking care of big data and automation in ways that we didn't before. And the big thing that is a shock to me is containers. We are actually managing containers as IT, where, that was going to be DevOps that was going to do that? Right? The cool kids were going to get to play with that? And that's not really true. We, as IT, are managing containers in a way that was unexpected. And I think that says a lot for who we are as admins. The idea that we really can do anything if you just give us a little bit of time and give us tools is pretty cool. Because I was afraid maybe that DevOps and automation was going to run away with pretty much everything, and it turns out, no. They turn to us, as they have for years, to address just about any new technology. So your homework here is just to notice that there seems to be a little bit of disconnect, where this is a year where there's a hype bubble around a bunch of new technologies that CIOs are really excited about. So we have an opportunity as admins and as seasoned voices of calm to really help them, and especially to help them manage things like think about budgets in new ways, right? Training, labs, to be able to work with new technologies, to be able to show them, hey, we are able to manage just about anything that you give us, but there is going to be a budget concern connected to that. Being able to learn some new tricks like add error rate reporting alongside your performance metrics. That way nobody panics if you get a little bit of red on the dashboard, but users are still happy, and you can prove that an error rate that goes up and down doesn't necessarily, in a distributed application or high availability application, compromise user acceptance and happiness of their application. And then the last thing is really talk to them and get them to understand that on-prem really is not going away. Like, its scale may change, but the idea that the cloud is magically going to take everything away is not true, and that you're still going to be doing a lot of detailed monitoring and troubleshooting. And that brings me to the end of this presentation, at the end of today, where they're going to close the doors and kick us all out. Thanks again for your time, everybody.
All right, let's have a big round of applause for Patrick.